Secrets of the C-Suite, the podcast, is for anyone interested in leadership and the wins, losses, and lessons of being an executive. We are two women who have successfully navigated C-Suite roles and are sharing our experiences. We will be bringing on guests to tell their stories and want to spark honest conversation and discussion, which may include swearing and lots of laughs. Join us on this adventure.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Secrets of the C-Suite, the podcast. I'm Susan Sutherland, and I'm here with Juliet Clothier, and we have a great guest with us today. We'll introduce her in just a minute. Juliet, good morning.
Hi, Susan. How are you doing?
It's a little early, but I'm fine. I'm excited to meet our guest today. How about you?
Oh, I'm very excited. I wanted to just talk a little bit about, we talked a few episodes ago about transitions and starting a new job. And so I am feeling a little more settled, but I'm still settling in. And it's a very odd feeling. I haven't done this in a long time. I've been working remotely for 5 years. So having a physical office and getting things out of boxes and trying to make my space work has been really interesting. And I was thinking about that I feel like I've been in transition for about 6 months now. And now the settling in part is kind of the most important part, and how people see you and the nervousness around, because it's a big job, big role that I have in the C-suite. People are worried, I can tell that people are nervous. Like, is she going to make all these changes, and will my job be stable, and all those things. And I'm just as nervous as they are, but they don't buy that, but it is definitely an interesting time.
Yeah. Sounds a little bit like a secret, right? Like we carry our own nerves as we come into any position of importance. Yeah. Well, as you know, I got back from South Africa a couple of weeks ago, and I feel like the settling part of a transition is a really interesting time, because you're still in transition, but everything around you says, get on with it. And my niece moved out after living with us for 2 years, and I can reclaim the guest room / my office, but I can't. There's things that need to be resorted and done. So it's a little unsettling, but I'm looking forward to really getting in and not being worried about where I can find my other set of earbuds, as I couldn't this morning. So. All right. Well, I think it's time to invite our guest in. And for our listeners, we're really excited to have Valari Staab with us today. She is a veteran media executive with more than 4 decades of industry and leadership experience. She currently serves as chairman of NBCUniversal Local in New York, after joining NBCUniversal in 2011 as president of NBC-owned TV stations. We might need Valari to talk a little bit about the organizational structure of NBCUniversal. In her role as chairman, Valari oversees more than 50 local, regional, and national media properties, including 11 NBC and 31 Telemundo-owned stations, 4 regional sports networks, 3 national multicast networks, 16 free ad-supported streaming TV channels, as well as LXTV Productions and Sky Castle. Under Valari's leadership, NBCUniversal Local has earned a position as a leading innovator dedicated to serving its audiences and making a meaningful impact on its communities across the nation. She has led the growth and investments that have transformed the division into a multi-platform media powerhouse that continually enhances the content, platforms, and community programs across its properties. Prior to joining NBCUniversal, Valari held leadership roles with ABC-owned television stations. Her last role with ABC with them as president and general manager of KGO-TV in San Francisco, which is where I first met her. Valari and I both served on the board of directors of the United Way of the Bay Area, and that brings Juliet into the mix, who actually worked as CFO for United Way. Valari has earned numerous accolades and honors for her work at NBCUniversal. In 2024, she was inducted into the Broadcasting and Cable Hall of Fame and was recognized as a, quote, giant of broadcasting and electronic arts, unquote, by the Library of American Broadcasting Foundation in 2023. She was also the recipient of the 2022 National Association of Television Programming Executives Iris Award. Valari, as the Brits say, we're so chuffed to have you with us here today. So welcome. How are you this morning?
Thank you. I'm good. It's not quite as early here as it is there, so I'm good.
It's great to see you. For our audience, Valari is sitting in her new office at 30 Rock, right?
Yep.
And you can't see her, but I'm going to describe it. She's sitting in a beautiful office with a bank of televisions behind her. So it's really very impressive. Valari, welcome. And we'd love to hear you tell us a little bit about the arc of your career. It's obviously very impressive. You have a really big job now, and we'd love to hear about that. But how did you get started?
So I was working my way through college, and at the time had 3 different jobs, just trying to make ends meet and be able to pay tuition for the next semester. And a job came open at a local television station. I was in Tyler, Texas, and the television station had an entry-level job, and I was taking a journalism class, and I had really enjoyed the journalism class, and the teacher was the general manager from the station, and he suggested that I go for this job. And once I looked at the job, it paid enough that I could drop the other jobs. And one of the other jobs that I had was the overnight shift at a Holiday Inn on a loop around town. And it was a scary job for a 19-year-old girl by herself at a front desk. So I really wanted to quit the job. So I basically applied for the job and talked them into hiring me. Just basically said, you have to hire me. And they did. And so it was a very simple job. They were computerizing their logs, which is basically the program schedule. And I was just checking contracts when I first got there. But it opened up my ability to volunteer to run camera when someone didn't show up to run camera, or if they were going to produce something outside of the station and needed an extra hand, I could volunteer for that. So I learned so much working at that little station, and I just, worked my way up until when I graduated from college, I was their public service director and a creative services producer. So I was producing commercials. And then I felt at that point that I had a lot of pieces about business, but they weren't really tied together. So I wanted to go to graduate school. And I, again, had the money problem. So I had worked out with my aunt and uncle that were at the University of Georgia that I could live with them, which is interesting. You said your niece just moved out. I was going to move in with my aunt and uncle. And that would, really lower my cost for graduate school. And the broadcasting company that owned KLTV in Tyler at the time, which was the Buford brothers, offered me to go to Baylor for 1 year because I could get my master's in 12 months. They would pay for it all, and they would keep me on payroll so that I would still have my benefits if I would come back to the station and start a new business development program. And I did. And it was part of trying to get more women in management in broadcasting because there were very few women in it at the time. And it was an incredible opportunity for me because it meant that I could go to school full time and not have to work for the first time. And so that's what I did. I got my MBA from Baylor, came back to the station and started a new business development and research department for them. Made a lot of money for the station through that. And then got the attention of a station in Houston, KPRC, and was hired to go to Houston. And from there, I just, kept working my way up. From Houston, I went to Philadelphia, and that's where I joined ABC-owned stations. I was with them for 23 years, and I've been with NBC for 14. So I tend to stay a while when I join a company. But when I loved ABC, had a great career there. When I was running KGO, which is when I first met you guys. I ran it for 9 years, and my boss, who was the person who ran the ABC group, retired. And basically, there were several of us that were candidates for that job. Only one person could get the job, but I didn't get it. But it put me on the radar of other station groups to run a group when I didn't get that job. And so NBC reached out to me, and I ended up at NBC. But, you know, one of the when I talk to women about their careers, one of the things I always tell them is when NBC reached out to me through a headhunter and said they wanted to talk to me, it never crossed my mind they wanted to talk to me about the group head job. I thought they wanted to talk to me about running either WNBC or KNBC, one of their big stations. And that was just a slightly bigger job than I currently had. And I'd been with NBC for 23 years, so I wasn't sure I wanted to do it. So I unknowingly played hard to get. I kind of put off going to the meeting. And so I finally got the meeting scheduled because I was going to be in New York for union meetings with ABC. And somebody in the industry called me and said, you know, they want to talk to you about the group head job. And I said, no, they want to talk to me. And he's like, no, listen to me. They want to talk to you about the group head job. And so I spent the weekend like cramming to realize what all the pieces were in the NBC portfolio. And then showed up for the interview. And they knew that it was hard for me to interview very long when I was working for a competitor because the group had stations in 6 of the ABC-owned station markets. And I was always very loyal to ABC, so I didn't want to be duplicitous at all. So they literally offered me the job the next day. And so the bad part was I never got to go back to KGO and really tell people goodbye because I didn't feel like it was fair to go back to the station. So I called my boss and told him I was going to take the group head job and didn't return to KGO. I went ahead and made the transition then. So then with NBC, when I first got the job, it was running the NBC stations. And then in 2013, they asked me to run the Telemundo stations, which has just been a wonderful, incredible experience. The group had been starved for resources and had no real training and help. They were doing an incredible job with what they had, but they had so little to work with. And so by combining them with the NBC stations, we were able to give them so many more resources and so much more training and grow them. And I'm so proud of the Telemundo stations now. They're just an incredible group of stations, and unbelievably talented journalists and meteorologists, and they've just grown so much. So now we have this really rich, great group with these big newsrooms in these big cities that are both Spanish and English. And then during the pandemic, they asked me to take on the regional sports nets. So we added the regional sports nets. So it just gives us this really great footprint in these big markets of sports fans and news and entertainment, viewers. And so it's been great. It's a great job.
What a journey. That sounds great. I wanted to touch on something that you mentioned about women in broadcasting. And when you started, there weren't a lot of women. And we've interviewed a few people over this season, especially who have been in similar situations where they are the sole woman or one of a few women in the industry. Can you talk about just a little bit how that has gotten better and maybe what's hurdles we still need to get over?
There were very few women in management when I started. If the department heads at a television station might have one woman that was a department head and almost no general managers of stations. And I felt pretty quickly once I got into the industry and really enjoyed it that I wanted to be a general manager because I liked that the general manager could really set the tone for the whole station. And television stations can be incredibly fun places to work, and they should be fun places to work. They're like, it's a fun job. It's fun to be connected to your community as much as we are. And so I wanted that opportunity to create the kind of work environment that I would want to work in. So I knew that that's what I wanted to do, but very early in my career, they kept they kept bringing young men in and having me train them so that they could go for management positions.
Wow.
So it was so frustrating. So I kind of had to really push to be like, okay, how about you consider me for a management position? And I really got there through my success, financial success, by bringing big advertisers to the stations and got the attention that way through sales. But it was frustrating. I mean, I had times when I went to industry events and I was just like sitting at a bar with people, in the industry talking, and a guy would lean over and say, women have ruined this industry. And, it's just that kind of, I had a lot of that early in my career, which obviously doesn't exist now. And women are at all levels of television now, and they're doing really well. And so what I've done in my career is I've tried to look for places where either minorities or women in the management level, in one management level, they were doing really, really well and a great mix of them. And then the next level, there were very few of them, because that's indicative of a problem. They should be breaking through to the top if there's a lot of them at the level below them. And then we've looked at what might be the problem and come up with solutions and helped people push through whatever barriers were keeping them from making it to the next level. And I think that I've always kept my eye on that because of what my own experience was.
Yeah. How much, Valari, and feel free to take your answer in any direction. How much engagement do you have directly with this huge portfolio that you have? How do you stay in touch with where there might be log jams for talented people to get visibility and get promoted?
Well, I try to run a very communicative organization. There's over 4,000 employees in the division. So I don't know everybody, but I visit all the stations, and there's usually some opportunity at the stations for people to walk up and talk to me and introduce themselves. And we try to constantly tell people that we want them to be successful in their career, and we want them to end up where they want to end up in their career. And we have to have more conversations about it. We have to talk about it more than I think other companies, because they often want to be in a certain city. And because we have limited number of jobs in any one city, we need to plan for it. So I try to encourage people to let their supervisor and their general manager know where they want to be. And then we at corporate keep a list on that, and we keep an eye out, and we try to eventually get people where they want to be. But you'd probably be surprised by how many of my employees, have met me, talked to me, and know me enough to send me an email and tell me if they're really wanting to get a job and not knowing how to get from where they are to where they're going. I have a lot of those conversations. I mentor a lot of young people too. And I also try to keep in touch with the department heads at the stations and see, what's going on at that level. And they'll tell me people that are up and coming, at the stations. So I travel a lot. I try to get to the 11 duopolies at least twice a year. And the 31 Telemundo stations, which are 20 of them that aren't connected to a duopoly, are harder. And there is a person, Jose Cancela, that runs those stations. So he's the one who really goes out to all of those stations. But I still try to get to him once every 2 years. It's hard because it's 31 different locations across the United States and Puerto Rico. But I try to get to them eventually.
I can hear that it's a priority for you. And Valari, it does not surprise me at all that there are people at all levels of the large organization that know you and reach out to you and feel comfortable doing that. You have a leadership style that is incredibly approachable and warm. And what I remember about you when we served on a board together was how fun you were. You could be dead serious and be making a point and still be really alive. And I think that sets a definite tone at the leadership level. If you were to identify your key values as a leader, what would those be?
I think transparency is probably a huge part of it. I tell our employees, and that every single employee at every level, as much information as I can give them about what our goals are, where we're headed, why we're headed that way, what we're doing. I also try to be super transparent when technology is going to cause somebody's job to go away. And sometimes I have run against people in my organization that think that's a bad thing and try to stop me from giving people a lot of notice. And I just push through and give them a lot of notice. People's career is their lives, it's their livelihoods, it's their families. They need as much information as they can get. And if you tell people that we are going to automate something, and in our particular organization, it takes about 3 years for us to implement a new system across the entire country in Puerto Rico. It's just so many locations. So there's time. If you tell somebody in 3 years, all of this is going to be automated and this is how we're rolling it out and this is who's going to be affected first, they can make the decision, am I close enough to retirement that I'll write it out and retire when that happens? Or do I have way too much of my career left? And do I need to find out what other jobs at the station are going to last and are going to be ongoing and start training for them and, changing now? So I think that gives employees confidence that they're not going to get hit over the head with some massive change that they never saw coming. So I try to be super transparent. I also try to be transparent on our overall goals and why any decision that we make, an employee can ask why the world we made that decision and we explain to them. I also try to be super transparent when we're wrong. We try things, and you can't be an entrepreneurial organization if you don't have failures, because if you're afraid of failure, you're never going to try anything. So we try things and we get things wrong. And so I try to be super transparent when we do something and say, you know what, that was the wrong way to go. And we're now shifting and we're pivoting this direction. And this is why. If I can't tell them the answer to their question, if they ask a question and I can't tell them, I also give them the reasons why I can't tell them so that they at least understand. And the vast majority of the times that I cannot tell them, it's because of somebody else's privacy. It's because I would be violating somebody else's privacy. And then another big value of mine is respect. I try to teach our managers from their first managerial position that there is no conversation, I don't care how difficult it is, that you can't have in a respectful manner. And I help them learn how to have a really tough conversation. I think it's the first thing managers should learn is how to have a difficult, hard conversation in a respectful way. And that's up to and including a conversation where you're parting ways with somebody, which is the most difficult conversations you have in business. They can still be handled in a respectful way where that person still has their dignity, understands the decision, and can move on in a positive way instead of a devastating or devastated way. So those are kind of the two pillars. We also want to be a place that everybody feels comfortable being who they are at work. And so we want to be accepting and open about people and their differences, because we run newsrooms that are Spanish language and English language newsrooms. We have a very, very diverse workforce. That has to be okay. So another value that I try to teach managers is don't worry about how people get their job done. Worry about the work product. Focus on the work product. Because if people come from wildly diverse backgrounds, they're going to get to the answer in different ways. We care about the answer. We don't care about the homework. We don't care about how they got there. We don't care about is the font the right color. We care about the end product. And that will lower people's frustration with trying to have everybody do things the same way, because people are different and people want control over their work product.
Yeah. I'm going to take a slight tangent here and ask how you managed. So what I hear you talking about is something that a lot of organizations really struggle with. It's called the butts and seats syndrome, where, you have to see your employee to feel like they're doing their job. And of course, the pandemic blew that all out of the water. You had employees working remotely. You couldn't see. How did you all manage the pandemic and the diversity of the ways people work in a remote environment?
I'm really proud of the way we handled the pandemic. The one thing that I think worked for us as a division was that I was in New York, and New York got hit first. So I saw everything that was happening in New York, and I saw what was happening to certain companies, like CBS had a control room contaminated and had to take a show off the air. I mean, I was watching things unfold, and what I didn't know then, but what I know now, is that what we were learning in New York was going to roll out across the country. And so we immediately had an isolated control room that was locked, and that was clean, locked, and nobody could go into as an emergency control room in all of our stations, so that if one was contaminated, someone came down sick and that control room was contaminated, there was a clean one to go into. So we just learned all of these things fast because of New York. And we had meetings every single day at the start of the pandemic that included all of our department heads and our general managers across the country. In New York, our New York stations told them what they were learning in real time, and everyone implemented the solution to that problem that day across the country and in Puerto Rico, which then was incredible for protecting our employees across the country. So, and then the entrepreneurial spirit of my division really shined. We were producing newscasts out of people's living rooms. They had literally control panels in their living rooms, and they were switching shows and with the anchors all at home and panels in their living room. And we did it fast. We got cameras in people's homes. We got these very simple switchers in people's homes. And it was incredible how fast my division was up and running with people remotely. And then, look, there are some jobs that you do not need to be in for, and we've kept those jobs remote. Like the people that work in our traffic section, which traffic for us is putting together the schedules for the daily programming. They don't need to be in a certain building. They're on their computer from the time they log on in the morning until the time they log off. And they're accomplishing a set task every day. They're getting the logs out for the next day. So you totally know if they're being productive or not. It's like the log's got to be there, right? The log's got to be there. So a lot of those people stayed remote. Now, some of them didn't want to stay remote. They missed the camaraderie and the fun of being at the station. So they came back to the station. But there was flexibility there. Where I think people really needed to get back to the station, obviously the newsroom needed to get back to the station. And the newsroom needed the support of other people in the station to be there and help them, like with creative services who does promos for the station. They needed the support people around them. But I also think young people early in their career, or people who are looking to really advance in their career, needed to get back into the station. Because they really need the mentoring and the exposure to the conversations that are not going to occur. You're not going to pull people up on Teams and talk about a solution to a problem. You're going to walk outside, grab a few people, and talk about it. So those people we very much encourage to come back. And a lot of young people wanted to come back because they, again, missed that camaraderie and the chance to really, grow and develop in their career.
Speaking of that, I want to talk about and have you talk to us about how you're managing the workplace today and, young people and, their ways of working and the ways of approaching work.
So my feeling is that the world is so complex and it's moving so fast technology-wise that if you are stayed in the workplace, you can't stop growing and changing. I don't care who you are, and I don't care how old you are. If you're going to work tomorrow, you need to today be keeping up with what's going on. And that includes evolving your management style, because every generation brings something different to the table. They're different, and they're going to want to be managed differently. And we definitely see, or what I definitely see, is a bit of a generation gap or a divide between people who have always had a supercomputer in their pocket and those of us who didn't, those of us who got those supercomputers, those phones later in our career. There is a big difference in those generations. They see the world differently and they experience the world differently, and we need to acknowledge that and grow and learn from them the same way that they grow and learn from us. So the big difference to me has been they want to be included in decisions that maybe in the past we didn't include employees at their level in. They want a lot more control over their work product, and they want a lot more control over their career. And they want a lot more accolades for their for their work product and their career. So they want to kind of see their trajectory more clearly. Like they want to know, I'm going to get a promotion at this point. I'm going to be eligible for a promotion. If I do these things, I'm going to be eligible for a promotion. So we've had to change a lot of the way that we set up jobs and how we monitor those jobs and literally how we promote for those jobs to give them that kind of transparency and clarity and that reward system that motivates them to achieve, in their job. So I think managing has always been tough, but I think it's tougher now because you have such a wide range of baby boomers to, 20-year-olds in the workforce, and they are very different people.
I totally agree. That's a great point. And being able to pivot, and I think, back to what you said just about admitting that you've made a mistake. That was something that we didn't start our careers with, right? And now that's expected. And it's really important that we have, humility, and that we show that you can fail and still be successful. And I think that, that ties into some of the stories you've told us today. I wonder if you could give us, we ask each person, and you've given us a few secrets already, but if you have like a secret that you were surprised about when you went from being an entry-level person into a very high-level position.
I think the thing that people need to have on their radar as they climb the corporate ladder, and especially get into a big company like the size of mine, is that you need to really focus on your peer relationships. As you're growing in management, it's natural for you to pay attention to the people who work for you, and it's natural for you to pay attention to the people you work for. The relationships that people undervalue are peer relationships, and they are so important, and they get more and more important as you go up. So if you look at the way we're structured at NBCUniversal, I run the local division, but I'm impacted by decisions made by NBC Network and Peacock and NBC Sports. So, and we have a whole division that's our distribution division that works with our cable companies and YouTube TV and all of the people who carry our signals. So these are big divisions on their own, separate from my division. If I don't have a good relationship with the people that run those divisions, it'll hurt my division tremendously. And there is an art and a science to good peer relationships, and a lot of art. And I think people can be very insular with their own division and their own group of people and not see the challenges and understand how they need to relate to the peer and what the peer's challenges are. And they can sometimes not be sympathetic to them. And you need to develop an approach that understands, that appreciates their issues and their problems, and then you help them solve them in ways that also solves your problem and your your challenges. And so it's best to be done like with a sense of humor. And, I'm a Texan and I'm very direct, and a lot of my peers tease me about how direct I am. So sometimes I have to temper that directness because I'm too direct. It's like, you have to think about how you come across to your peers and develop those relationships very carefully. And a lot of people just don't pay enough attention to them. But the higher you get up, the more important they are to your overall success.
Yeah, I love that observation, Valerie. It really resonates for me. It also occurs to me, and this has happened to me in all kinds of ways during my career, which is your peer could someday be your boss, or they could be your direct report. And there's an awkwardness when that happens that can be tempered a little bit if you've got relationships while they're still your peer. So we're coming to the end of our time, unfortunately. We want to be respectful of your time, but I have one final question, if you'll indulge us. And that's a question around you and your personhood. How do you restore, Valerie? You've got a really big job. You travel a lot. You have a life. How do you take care of yourself in the middle of this big career?
So I'm somebody who's very recharged by being out in the wilderness and the woods and on the water. And I'm very water oriented. I have a home on the Jersey Shore, and then my home in New York is on the Hudson River. So it's like I stick to water. When I was in Philadelphia, I lived on the Delaware, and when I was at KGO, I lived on the bay. So being on the water and being in the wild is how I restore myself. And so in New York, there's a lot of things to love about New York, but if you are in New York, you are on the whole time. You don't even realize it, but just the noise of New York keeps you keyed up and ready, and you're like always on. You're always on this like edge. You don't even really know it because you're hearing like sirens in the background and traffic noise. So I go to our place at the shore, which is just an hour away by ferry from New York, every weekend. And I kayak there, and I have two swans that live on my beach, and they're raising babies right now. So I just get into nature. But I think I'll talk about a secret or a tip. I think that the one thing people can do to lessen the burden of the pressure of their high pressure job is to not pay attention to their phone when they're doing other things. It's like, set the darn phone down. Like when I go kayaking, I often don't even take my phone. And when I sit down to talk to any of my employees, I do not look at my phone. My employees don't see me glancing at my phone when they're talking to me. It's like, if you just learn to be in the moment for everything you do, it will keep you from that extra layer of stress. And I really think that right now is the biggest problem. People are so tied to their phone, they can't stop looking at their phone. And that adds an underlying level of stress to everything.
Beautiful observation, and thank you for that. And it's a lesson I try to think about every single day as the phone. It's that dopamine hit, right? There's news, there may be text, there's things happening.
Well, I think you also need to model the behavior for all your other employees. Like my general managers are less likely to glance at their phone because they see me not looking at my phone. So, you can get a whole organization having better habits if you model those habits.
For you.
I love it. Love it.
Yeah. Valerie, thank you for joining us today. We are at the end of our podcast. You've been a great guest. Thank you for being so generous with your thoughts and experiences. For our listeners out there, we hope you've enjoyed today's episode. This has been Secrets of the C-Suite, the podcast, and stay tuned for another episode, the final for season 2, coming shortly.
We're so glad you've joined us for this episode of Secrets of the C-Suite, the podcast. We'll be back with another episode in 2 weeks. In the meantime, please tell your friends and coworkers about us, and be sure to follow, subscribe, and give us a 5-star rating if you enjoyed listening. Secrets of the C-Suite is produced by Juliet Clothier, Susan Sutherland, and Brian Clothier. Original music is by Brian Clothier, and the podcast is inspired by leaders like you.